Hello, Kuman229 here, another Topic of the Week video, and this week, Halloween month continues with another RWBY topic. This time, on the villains. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr anon, and their topic is, why do you prefer Roman and Neo? Why do you think Roman especially makes a good villain? What is it about Cinder you feel isn't as good? What changes would you make to Cinder? Roman and Neo are hands down the best villains that RWBY has ever had. Why? Because they don't take themselves seriously, and the story doesn't go out of its way to try to treat them as serious grand villains. That's why they work. Compared to Cinder, who you're supposed to take seriously. You're supposed to fear her character. You're supposed to think she's this brilliant mastermind, and she's one of the blandest characters in the entire show. Roman and Neo are wonderful because, to put it simply, they're entertaining. That's really what it boils down to, is the entertainment value. Roman and Neo don't take themselves seriously, the story doesn't take them seriously, and they're allowed to be ridiculous. I mean, Roman Torchwick is based off of Lampwick from Pinocchio, and Neapolitan is based on Neapolitan ice cream. You just... you can't make super serious villains out of this, and they're not, and they embrace the ridiculousness. Roman is totally insane in that he never actually reacts strongly to the crap that's going on. In fact, he usually responds with sass.
Tell me what it is, or I'll put an end to your little operation.
I wouldn't exactly call it a little operation.
Just got this thing cleaned.
Oh, I can't believe that you caught me. You've really taught me the error of my ways. Hey, watch the hat.
I've been informed that so far you've refused to cooperate with the authorities.
I know this might be hard to believe, General, but I'm not the biggest fan of local law enforcement.
How about the world's strongest military power?
First impressions? Not great.
And Neo? Neo? She's just ridiculous. And, she doesn't talk, which I'm sure that was done because she was added, just late into development for Volume 2. And they probably couldn't rewrite scenes to feature dialogue, and they'd probably have to get a voice actress, and they'd have to, re-record lines, and I'm sure that was more of a hassle than just animating her. So she doesn't say anything, but funnily enough, that makes her stick out and actually makes her more memorable. Because when she's surrounded by villains that are talking, Neo sticks out far more by not talking than she would if she actually just talked. And on top of this actually forces her to be more expressive as a character, which is something that definitely works in her favor. She and Roman are far more expressive than the other villains, in particular Cinder. You get to see them react, you get to see them, you get to see Roman angry, you get to see him peeved, you get to see Neo scared, like when Raven shows up. You get to see them, have emotions, and it makes them feel a little bit more human than Cinder, who is just bland, poorly written, has terrible dialogue, and an awful vocal performance. Ugh. Roman in particular is a great villain because he's just fun. He's a fun character. He's fun to see in conflict with our main characters. He's fun to see fighting. He's fun to see just sassing people. Even when he's being a jerk, he's still fun to watch because you can just enjoy him and his douchebaggery because he's just a ridiculous villain. Neo in particular runs almost entirely off of charm and her fighting style, which she's got an extremely playful fighting style that we see when she fights Yang in Volume 2, and this very much is fun to watch. Neo and Roman aren't particularly deep. We don't have backstories on them, though I would love to see backstories on them, and I think they really should have given them backstories. But we don't particularly need it. We don't really need deep motivations for them because, well, they're not serious villains who need clear, direct motivations. They're thieves. They want money. That's really all you truly need. Cinder, on the other hand, she is supposed to be our plot villain. She's supposed to be a main villain, and for the first 3 volumes, she is, by all accounts, the main villain. It's only afterwards that we find out she was working for someone else, but that doesn't stop her from being the main villain of the first 3 volumes. But we still don't know anything about her. We don't know what her motivations are. We don't know why exactly she's doing all of this, other than she's the bad guy and she has to do bad things in order for there to be a plot, which is not compelling. If you want to make this a serious plot, if you want to make this a serious plot character, then you need to give us good writing behind it that really supports it. And Cinder doesn't really have that. Roman, when he was first introduced, I mean, shoot, Volume 1 doesn't really have much of a, in the way of plot until like the very end of the volume. But their conflicts with Roman Torchwick are fine. Shoot, even when RWBY first goes up against him in episode 1, we don't need an explanation to be entertained by his character, because he is just entertaining. He is a fun personality, as does Neo, despite the fact that she doesn't talk. And really, Roman and Neo are great because, well, RWBY is at its best when it's not taking itself too seriously. Even when it is having serious moments, it usually knew before when to not take itself that seriously. Like in the whole Mountain Glen arc in the final arc of Volume 2. You have Team RWBY and a teacher are going on a mission to track down the White Fang, and then RWBY brings her dog along, and Oobleck fawns over the dog and ends up bonding with the Xiaolong family dog, and he ends up using Zwei to turn him into a fireball and destroy a mech. That is totally insane and totally ridiculous, and that's one of the reasons that why the final arc of Volume 2 is so entertaining and why the finale overall is good. Even when the Grim attack Vale, well, the teachers and the upperclassmen huntsmen do come in and, yeah, they whoop butt. Coco herself practically single-handedly puts down the Grim. So it's not really that dark, and it knows that, yeah, this can be totally ridiculous, and this is what's entertaining, and this is why Roman and Neo work. Cinder, gosh. What I don't like about Cinder can be summed up as, I feel like we were just supposed to automatically love Cinder. That's the impression that I got when I was watching Volumes 2, 3, and even 4. When Cinder comes in, it feels like they just expected them to be, oh, it's the man behind the man. Oh, I love this new, complex and crazy and manipulative villain, but they forgot to give her personality. And she just sits around making these vague statements, and she is brilliant. And by brilliant, it's basically Light Yagami style brilliance, where the only reason that she is considered smart is because everyone around her makes dumb decisions, and the writer literally hands things to her on a silver platter. Shoot, in Volume 3, she just suddenly comes up with the schematics for Penny, and she's just like, well, this makes my job even easier. I'm like, how, what? Cinder suffers from the problems that she doesn't match the show. While I say that Neo and Roman both fit RWBY to a T because of their ridiculousness, Cinder isn't ridiculous enough. And they want you to take her seriously, and I get that, but you can't take all your characters that seriously. There has to be some sort of ridiculousness to it. She can't be calm and collected all the time. She can't be always being able to outwit everyone. She can't be the most powerful dust/magic user. She can't have the maiden powers. She can't also be a super hacker. She can't have all this and then have next to no flaws. She's pretty much a villain Sue. She's full-on villain Sue in Volume 3. And it's so boring. I mean, if she was like absolutely axe crazy and just totally lost her mind and was just wanting to kill people, then that would probably be more interesting than what we got. Because at least that would be a personality. On top of that, like I said before, we don't have any real motivations for Cinder. We don't know why she's doing what she's doing. Outside of being the bad guy. I mean, just... Oh, it's frustrating that we have a villain here who could be interesting if handled right, but Cinder is just so boring. And that's really what... There's not even a whole lot to actually talk about her character, because there's nothing there. Even when you get the flashbacks in Volume 3, Episode 7, it's... Well, aside from being canonically inconsistent, it's just... Okay, what does this even tell us about Cinder's character? She used to wear her hair short? She recruited Mercury and Emerald? It's honestly absurd. Because, yeah, like I said, I just feel like we're supposed to automatically be in love with Cinder's character. But you really, if you want me to fall in love with a character, there's got to be a character first. And ultimately, Cinder is one of the biggest disappointments. And I consider the only downside to Volume 2, because, gosh dang it, whenever she's on screen in Volume 2, it's just like, oh my gosh, just get her off. I literally just get to another scene. Just, the plot, no, I don't care. Just move on. I want to see goofy stuff with Team RWBY. Just move on. And considering how prominent her character is, that shouldn't be your audience's reaction. Because she is super important, but they failed to make me really care about her by actually giving her any good writing. Now, when it comes to rewriting Cinder, I do have quite a lot of ideas. In fact, the entire, first 4, volumes, I would say, are dedicated to Cinder's story. And in Volume 3, the way I write Volume 3, it's very much... I need to explain Cinder's backstory, explain Cinder's motivation, so you know who she is and why she's doing what she's doing. Funnily enough, the whole rewrite I have, as massive as it is, actually started with just Cinder. After I watched Volume 2, my thoughts were... And I knew Volume 3 was going to have the bad stuff that I had been spoiled to before I started watching the series, so I thought, alright, before I get into it, I just want to take a crack at... fixing the one thing that I really didn't like from Volume 2, Cinder's character. And a lot of the ideas that I have, and I'm going to talk about, are ideas that I had initially, and that's what I based a lot of things that I did in the series, particularly in the second major arc, over, because a lot of this was connected to Cinder, and a lot of things do end up connecting, and, and a lot of my initial ideas didn't have, as much background, lore, and characters connected to it. But that was where the start of my overall rewrite came in. That's where that came from. And I'll talk more about the rest of the rewrite in the next, topic video, because that one is specifically asking about Volumes 3 and 4 and how I would write them. Now, for Cinder's character, like I said, you get Cinder's backstory in Volume 3, and by the finale of my Volume 3, you would know everything there is that you need to know about Cinder for that story arc. You don't know everything, but you know what you need to know to understand her conflict with Ozpin. So, as you find out, and there would be 2 flashback episodes, one in particular, is entirely from Cinder's point of view, where you get to see basically a summation of her life story, and up to her attending Beacon, because she did in fact attend Beacon. And then you get another one with Ozpin and Glinda, and their side of the, and you get to see things that involve them, because you do find out that Cinder was actually on a Beacon team with Ozpin, Glinda, and Ironwood way back in the day, almost 20 years ago. And this is where a lot of the core issues really come up for her character, because she suffered a lot of tragedy in her life. She basically ended up losing her family to a fire. She ended up on her own having to take care of herself, and she wanted to become a huntress to basically make money so that she can take care of herself, so she can just live a comfortable life, which, that's a decent motivation. I mean, you can't really blame someone who's lost their family to simply want to be able to live comfortably. Unfortunately, she was very much like Jean back then, and she was pretty weak. She could use dust, and that's about it. I'll go into this more in the next topic video, but I go full tilt with the magic in my rewrite of RWBY, because it's more fun when there's more magic involved. And Cinder is capable of doing magic, like full-on real magic, wizardry, witchcraft, all that stuff. And this is one of the reasons why she's so good with dust. And that's really all she is good with. So she ends up on a team with Ozpin, Glinda, and Ironwood, and she ends up developing a pretty severe inferiority complex. Because Ozpin, back then, was sort of like Pyrrha, where he was really popular with everyone. He wasn't like a celebrity or anything, but he was strong. He could fight off a Grim with his bare hands. Ironwood was a star student from Atlas. And Glinda, who I also write in as being from Atlas as well, she was also really, her, of course with her semblance being as powerful as it is, she was obviously a star student as well. So, and then there's Cinder, or Cynthia as she was known before, because in this, Cinder Falls is an alias, because she doesn't want people recognizing her name. She's surrounded by these really strong people, and at first she looks up to them, but ultimately ends up coming to resent them because they make her feel weak. Even though she's really not that weak, she gets better, but she just can't handle it. And this developing inferiority complex, which does come into play with her character later, and is the reason why she has such a focus on Pyrrha. In fact, it has nothing to do with anything Pyrrha did. It's just the fact that Pyrrha is naturally talented. So Cinder wants to tear down anyone who's stronger than her, anyone who's just better, because she just hates them for it. And this ultimately is the source of her conflict with Pyrrha, and over volumes 3 and 4, her conflict with Pyrrha does end up being a significant rivalry. Now, one of the biggest plot twists here is that back at Beacon, Cinder and Ozpin used to date. It wasn't for that long, but they did date. And no, before anyone gets worried, no, this isn't she's mad because she's a stilted lover. No. That actually has nothing to do with it. In fact, because Cinder started feeling so weak and inferior to everyone, she started delving into some really dangerous stuff. Things like injecting dust into herself, which is played up more like a bit of a drug addiction. It does give her this power up, and she can basically use dust far more freely that way. It's just really hazardous to your health, though with the right magic that she uses, she can keep herself alive. And she starts dabbling in dark magic, which is a significant part of the lore of the series in this, and is something delved into far more heavily in the next arc, in the next overall story arc, after Cinder is defeated. And the dark magic is very much illegal. I mean, this is stuff like committing sacrifices, blood magic, things that kill people. She she started getting into that. And when Osmond found out, he immediately reported. He tried to get her to stop, but considering the fact that she felt like she had no other option, Osmond went and reported her to the then current headmaster, his predecessor before his untimely death, and ended up getting Cinder arrested. So she ended up fleeing and ultimately, felt like Ozpin ruined her life. So that's why she hates Ozpin. That's why she wants to destroy Beacon. She wants to destroy the institution that she tried to She tried to go in there and just live a life, but ultimately she felt like they robbed her of her, the life that she should have had. And she blames Ozpin for this. And Glinda and Ironwood, she does place blame on them too. She wants to kill him as well, but particularly it's Ozpin. She wants to kill him and destroy Beacon and just ruin everything that he's worked for. Just destroy it. Just leave him with nothing and kill him when he has nothing left. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. But you understand by the end of Volume 3 why she wants to fight Ozpin, why she hates him so much. You get to find out you get to see the personal relationship she formed with Glinda and Ironwood. And honestly, this really, I think this really works to give certain scenes in the past more meaning behind them. Like when Glinda first fights Cinder in Episode 1. Now that's not just a fight between a good guy and a bad guy. It's a fight between two former teammates where Glinda didn't recognize her because she was in the shadows and no one had seen Cynthia in 20 years, so they had never actually particularly thought about it. And ultimately in Volume 3 they do find out her identity, which is basically part of a whole plotline. I'll explain that more in the next topic video. I keep saying that, but this stuff starts delving more into the overall plot lines, and I'll talk more about that later and how that affects Cinder. But this is mostly just how I rewrite her character. So yeah, you do find out that Cinder is far more interesting of a character than she is before, and it's funny because I ended up when I was rewatching it, I was really kind of digging into different things that she does to really kind of delve into why she does what she does. And once you get the flashbacks for her backstory, you start seeing a lot of little things about her character and how she's essentially trying to imitate her former teammates by, acting like them and trying to recreate, the things that they did. She always acts all calm and collected, trying to be Ozpin. Ozpin's very calm and collected, very, very rarely shaken, though. You do see him shaken, rattled, and even scared at times in my rewrite. You'll see that Cinder tries to be strategic like Ironwood, and funnily enough, I had this wonderful idea. The line where she says that it's not about overpowering them, it's about taking away what power they have, is actually a line from Ironwood. Comedically, it's said when when their team is playing basically the Remnant Risk game. But she is so desperate to try to appear, strong like them that she's trying to copy them. Oh, and I guess I should say that their team name was Team Jaco, as in Jacobian era. It'd be James Ironwood, Glinda Goodwitch, Cynthia Brines, and then Oswald Ozpin. So that's their naming thing. Another thing is that Glinda back at Beacon used to wear her hair over her shoulder. And who does that in the current time? It's funny because even if Cinder doesn't really recognize that she's specifically doing this, it's interesting to see that she's almost so desperate to be like them that she still sees them as better than her, that she's trying to imitate them. Which really adds a lot of layers to her character, and even sometimes scenes that were just totally... you wouldn't even probably remember them from Volume 2. They hold a little bit more meaning now, after you find out about her backstory. And really, I did a lot of this because I wanted Cinder to have a more interesting backstory, and I wanted Cinder to have a backstory, and I wanted there to be a reason for you to actually feel some sympathy for her, but understand that what she's doing is bad. Now, another important thing for Cinder's character in this is that everything that she does in volumes 1 through 4, all of her plans, everything that she does up to her defeat, all of this is done of her own volition. Even though there are people behind her, no one is controlling her, no one's giving her orders. Everything she's doing is part of her own plan. Her revenge scheme is entirely her own. Her, plans are entirely her own. Her, successes and her mistakes and her fault are all entirely her own. And I really want him to do this because I really don't like it when you have a villain that gets basically demoted instead of being a significant villain. And I wanted Cinder to not just be someone else's puppet. I wanted her to actually be her own villain. And you do see that she ultimately causes her own defeat through certain mistakes. One of which is particularly led by her inferiority complex. The whole thing of having Mercury fights Pyrrha, and particularly she wanted to focus on Pyrrha because of her, she's naturally talented, so she obviously can't stand for that. Ultimately, because Mercury fought Pyrrha, later in Volume 3, about midway through, there is a big fight where Pyrrha does end up fighting Mercury and Emerald, or Team Juniper ends up fighting, Roman, Mercury, Emerald, and Neo, where Emerald and Mercury are disguised, and they do recognize what, Pyrrha recognizes Mercury's weapons from their scuffle, which ultimately ends up leading to their identities being figured out, which ultimately leads to Cinder herself being found out, and putting a damper in her plans. All because she was focused on her own insecurities. And a lot of this stuff, that fault is entirely her own. And the successes she has up to then are entirely her own. So you really get to see her character and everything that she does, because, it's something that's underestimated with some writers, that we want to see the villains have their own struggles as well. They're trying to overcome something too. And that's another thing to talk about with Roman. You do see Roman struggle. He is not as strong as other people. He's not the best fighter. He can be pretty overwhelmed. Even by our main characters, he doesn't have the magic powers they do. So Roman, in a lot of ways, is put at a disadvantage. So you get to see him work towards, his goals, and basically fighting our main characters, and stuff like that makes him more compelling, and it makes you want to see more of him and see, will he succeed? You don't want him to ultimately succeed, but you do want to see him. Do want to root for him at least a little bit to put up a fight, and that's really what I want to do with Cinder. You do see her, in some ways struggle, in some ways fight. That even though she is, powerful at this point, she still has her own issues that she needs to work out. And you do get to see her, ultimately, her defeat comes from a whole cataclysm of events that she actually could have prevented had she not been so focused on her own personal issues. And really, when it comes to the rest of Cinder, there is more backstory involving her and other characters involved, and in particular, I won't talk too in detail about it, but there are explanations for why she had a hack to the CCT. Like, she got that from someone who's another villain that will show up later. The Paladin Max. She got those from the same person. So when Roman says,
As some of you may have heard, this right here is Atlas's newest line of defense against all the scary things in the world. And thanks to my employer, we've managed to snag a few before they hit the shelves.
Yeah, it's because she got them from that guy. So there is a lot of stuff that Cinder ties into overall in the story, but that starts delving into stuff that's far, far more later on in the rewrite. And that's mostly when it comes down to all of Cinder's character and how I would rewrite her character. Because my main focus was making her a more interesting character. Because if you want to delve into more plot, which I do delve into a lot more plot, you know, you have to provide a more interesting plot. You have to actually provide an interesting story and characters in order to support you know, a more significant plot. And that's really a lot of what I do with Cinder, since she is more or less the central figure for the first 4 volumes and that whole saga that Cinder's in charge of. Yeah, I think that's about it for that. I mean, I have more I could talk about, but I think that's about it, all the main important stuff when it comes down to Cinder. So yeah. So if you want to submit a topic, you can comment below on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.